If you think there's been a move now, they're your next Google. They're your next Amazon.
Drone stocks are soaring thanks to new contracts with the Defense Department.
The impact on the economy, the workforce, is probably as big as anything, including AI, because it solves the problem and it solves it in a way that's less expensive than any other way possible.
From mining to batteries and local manufacturing, Cameron Chell with Draganfly Drones shares where investors can look for the greatest growth opportunities in this sector.
It hasn't started yet. We're just getting into the first inning of what will unfold in this space.
Cameron, so great to have you back on the show. We first met you a couple of months ago talking about drone stocks as being the next major investment, and we are really seeing that play out in the market right now. Your company and many other drone stocks saw a big boost just in the last couple of weeks. What's behind all of this renewed investment into drones right now?
Well, thanks for having us. We really appreciate being here and there being interest from our shareholders and investors out there. I think what's happening is the inevitable. So, there's a tectonic shift through World War I where we saw things like warfare or industry in general move, from, human interaction and resourcing to mechanization. And now what we're seeing is that mechanization is now moving to automation. And so this is just that natural progression of everything from generational understanding to technological advancement to budgets being applied into automation. And the companies that are positioned there well and have demonstrated the ability to execute are now seeing that wave actually coming to fruition. Now, Draganfly would love to say they're in the right place at the right time, and we are, but we've been here for 27 years now, waiting to be in the right place at the right time. There was no skill on our part. It was just resilience. But that's really what we're seeing is the rubber hit the road.
Yeah, I love what you said about budgets are starting to come into play, and that's the main thing. We're seeing all this renewed investment into drones, companies like yours, and into the development of these products. Before we get into a really exciting announcement for Draganfly, I want to talk about drones as robotics investments too. One of the most popular topics on our channel has been investors really interested in robotics and the different advancements in automation. And drones really are a part of that, right?
Drones are a robot. They just happen to be an aerial robot. One of the projects I'm most excited about in Draganfly, and I can't mention the name of the company, but this company designed a robot that would go along the edge of a wind turbine and re-edge the wind turbine and re-epoxy it. Now, you have to do that about every 18 to 24 months on a wind turbine, because if the angle of the blade changes, the efficiency loss is incredible. It's exponential, actually. But when dust hits a wind turbine blade and it's spinning, it's actually hitting at often supersonic speed. So it wears that edge down. How they repair those edges currently is literally harnesses, humans, and helicopters. So incredibly expensive and very dangerous. This company's spent 5 years designing a robot that would go along the edge. At the end of the day, the project was successful in terms of being able to edge, but they had no way of getting the robot up there effectively without harnesses, helicopters, and humans. So we have designed and integrated a very complex drone system that actually flies the robot on. It's integrated completely in software and hardware, and it drives, and you got to imagine these things are swinging up there in the wind, and it drives the robot along the edge. So it's an integrated aerial and wind turbine edge robot along the edge, automatically sands it down, re-edges it. It over the next 5 years, it will save the wind turbine industry billions. It is unbelievably innovative. Of course, Draganfly is now the only company in the world, candidly, that can do this. What's going on in the robotics space? Because this is a subset. It just happens to be the most complex subset, probably because it's aerial and 3D space. But yeah, I agree. And people should absolutely be excited about what's going on in the robotics space. The impact on the economy, the workforce, is probably as big as anything, including AI, that we've seen. And in fact, it's, AI is also a subset of robotic or vice versa.
Right, absolutely. I love that example you shared because it's just one example of all of the innovations that can come from all of the investment happening into robotics and into into drones right now. So great story. Those kind of advancements and innovations that your company is working on is why you just secured a nice contract with the U.S. Department of Defense that really helped to boost your stock just last week, a big jump in your stock price. Let's talk about that contract a little bit.
I think the market's been waiting for quite some time to start to see validation points with the 4 or 5 kind of main comps out there that are publicly traded. And for us, what's most important is for people to see the signature of that client. So size and such isn't as important right now in general, but it's the fact that you've gone through 3 years of testings and certifications and audits and clearances, and then obviously, demonstrating the capability to deliver this type of a product that's so mission critical, and being selected by the Army to do it is an incredible honor to the team that has been working on this for quite some time. What's very unique about this particular order is that this isn't just about buying drones from Draganfly. This is actually what we call an embedded manufacturing process. So what the Department of War and the Army in particular have understood, mostly from the lessons in Ukraine, where we've been boots on the ground since 2022, is that a drone's usefulness in the Ukraine theater is about 10 days. So what the Army has recognized is they can't go through 4-year procurement cycles. They need to go through cycles where they're manufacturing on their bases, they're doing modifications on their bases, they're able to do maintenance on their bases, they're able to iterate every 10 days. So when you're selecting a supplier and a partner, you're not just selecting somebody who has, presumably a superior product, but they also have a superior infrastructure and culture to be able to support and embed their manufacturing, manage supply chains, handle logistics of inventory. So this is a very, very deep partnership that you don't get selected for because you have a great product. You get selected for because you have a culture, you have a character, you have unbelievable amount of clearances that you've gone through, and you've got trust with folks that are serving our freedom.
Yeah, that trust is built over many years, like you said, with Draganfly. And I know you touched on a little bit about how long Draganfly has been a part of what's been going on in Ukraine. If you missed our first video with Cameron, I've got a link here so you can go back and watch that interview where he talked a lot about how drones were so useful in that conflict and how it's kind of changed warfare across the globe right now. It's a really great video. Again, if you haven't watched that one, I'm linking that here too. Cameron, let's talk a little bit more about some new uses that the Department of Defense is getting for drones. That's another project that you're working on, not necessarily with warfare, but on another part of the U.S. border.
Yeah, so we also recently just announced that the Cochise County Southern Border Sheriffs commissioned from us a drone that we designed in conjunction with them. That's what's called a multi-rotor drone, but has all the capabilities of a fixed-wing drone. So what that means is that this drone that we co-designed and are now building for them has the ability to stay up in the air for up to 7 hours, can carry up to 100 pounds, is fully integrated with their AI camera systems, their network operations center. This drone can do what they call ISR, so intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It flies at about 80 miles an hour, and with that type of dwell time, it has the ability to cover their whole county. But it also has the ability to get down and do interdictions. So it can deliver, it can do arrests, it can stop people in their tracks, it can do search and rescue, it can do close personnel support, and it can run fully automated, it can run by stick, it can run semi-automated, it can be a communication link, it's got all of these capabilities. Now, we spent many, many, many hours and trips down there with their Border Patrol personnel on horseback, understanding where communication gaps were, understanding where holes were, understanding the temperature, absolutely every aspect that was required in order to build a drone to do that. And I think that's a differentiator for Draganfly, that we have that type of integrated field experience to then work with our customers to design a drone. So our hope and the plan is that this will become a standard drone and operating environment for the southern border. So that drone goes operational November 16th. And as it goes operational, there's dozens of everybody from Homeland Security through to local precincts are closely watching how this thing performs. So we're really excited that we were selected to be able to put that together for them.
A really interesting project and one that has so many potential uses. But I think it's just an innovative way of using robotics, using drones to help protect Americans and protect soldiers out in the field too. I think the one thing that is interesting about this is the role that it can play in preventing drugs from getting across the border. I know you touched on that a little bit, but talk a little bit more about the specific design and how it could help in that area.
Well, I think there's a large perception out there that the border's been closed. And so, largely from a migration standpoint, that is the case. And that trickles over into human trafficking, has been greatly affected, but to the positive in this regard. But the fentanyl crossings, the drug crossings, I can tell you from firsthand knowledge, are, I can't say they're up, but they're certainly not down. And they seem to be much more bold now than before. So this drone in particular was designed to work with the in-field AI cameras and the AI systems, provide additional data, communication links, and do real-time AI processing. And this processing can identify the type of backpack, the type of camouflage, likely what family they're coming from, or cartel, if you will, what their patterns are, are their patterns changing over time? It has instant ability to communicate with all the other different commands, whether it's border, whether it's sheriffs, whether it's local, those types of things. And so the implications of being able to, and the sophistication required now to shut down the ever-increasing sophistication of the cartels, it just requires this type of equipment. There's significant, very large budget being put towards us because now we're getting down to the problem. Shutting down the borders, I would never say that was easy. It was bold and it's been successful. Now we get to deal with the problem.
Yeah, and an innovative way to do it and actually address it head on. So very interesting concept, and also why we're seeing so much investment from the U.S. government and different areas of government into the products that you are developing right now. One thing that you said, and I know our investors or retail investors are also interested in, are kind of the picks and shovels plays that go along with drones. And you mentioned one, which is batteries. A 7-hour lifespan for these drones to be able to fly time is great. And I know that comes with innovation in the batteries and other parts for the products that you're developing. Anything you want to say about the different battery stocks or other picks and shovels areas that investors should be looking right now with all of the development?
Battery stocks and innovative battery stocks are super interesting. We're deep in battery development and always pushing to innovate that way. As Steve Jobs famously say, in design, everything it starts and ends with the battery. I think in this particular case, on a bit of a selfish plug here, this particular drone actually runs on a combination of either one or two different combustion engines. And these are engines that can run literally any kind of fuel because you don't know what you've got out there. So you got Jet A, you got diesel, you got, whatever it is. So there are also very few companies out there and maybe none in North America that have that same capability to do a hybrid model, to do electric models, to do fixed wing aircraft, to do engine mounts, and then still tie it in, manage all the electronic interference and such. The complexity is really, really big. So we're seeing requirements drive innovation today. So I think there are ways out, but they're coming very quickly. Things like even hydrogen on drones right now is realistically being looked at. Power sources are always a big deal. Camera systems that are developed and manufactured in North America, that would be hot. Motors that are, anything that kind of relates to that what they call the National Defense Authorization Act. Anything that can fit within that's basically manufactured, I'd say in North America, is potentially a hot item.
Yeah, on that front, we've been talking a lot about different mining, different companies that were trying to get some of these rare earth materials mined in North America, in the U.S. Is that a part of the drone or robotics story at all for you?
Yeah, it is. It's really important because right now the lithium primarily comes out of China, believe it or not. So those rare earths or strategic metals are a really important part of the entire ecosystem altogether. And, thank goodness in North America, we actually do have a plethora of those available to us as we work through the appropriate, environmental measures and stuff. How quickly can we get them online? But there's also other great companies out there that are knowing that that's going to come online, are now putting the packaging together that would enable companies like us to purchase those particular products.
Yeah, very interesting. A few more questions and then some more advice for our investors, which is what we love having you on for. It's so many good insights on what's happening in this industry. We've had a couple of people on talking about robotics, and one thing that we've heard from multiple fronts is that the US right now seems behind China in the robotics race in building and developing. Are we seeing that right now in the robotics and drone space too?
Well, interestingly enough, I would say that in the robotic space, we're less far behind than we are in the drone space if you count drones as separately or as a subset of robotics. So, from a pure technology standpoint, this is just my own opinion, that the US still has a slight lead in the sophistication of its robotics. However, that gap is closing incredibly quick. And from a pure capacity side, we don't, we're distantly far behind. So our capacity to build robots with a secure supply chain en masse is years and years behind, and we're gonna get our lunches fed to us on that front. Right now, it seems like it's okay because we have a slight technological advantage, but there's 8 to 10 times the engineers working on that problem in China than there are here. So it's a real risk. On the drone side, they have a distinct advantage, and they have a government infrastructure that supports and continues to fund that advantage. Even with the changes that we've made and seen recently, it still pales by comparison to the dollars that are being committed into it. Drones are likely right now, the number one that can create an asymmetric advantage. Right? Whether it's in warfare, public safety, data collection, nothing collects data better than a drone, other than maybe AI and some pretty unique power generation initiatives. It is probably the one area that China will continue to invest heavily in. And we've done a lot. It's nowhere near enough if we're going to be competitive.
Yeah, that leads to kind of the final question and advice for investors too is looking to the future. We've seen so much growth in your company and in many different drone stocks this year. How much more growth do we foresee in the future? What kind of growth potential could your company and the whole sector see moving into 2026?
We all said that the internet was going to take 2 years and was going to be a big success. And the reality was it took 10 years, but it was about 1,000 times bigger than anybody. Like, it is so pervasive now that there's nothing that happens without, it's just that fundamental to society. That is the exact same thing that is happening in robotics and drones. So if you think there's been a move now, I mean, if you want to trade or day trade, I can't make any prediction, but probably the 3 to 5 known companies that are out there today that are getting those signature orders, they're your next Google. They're your next Amazon. And so the upside is, if you think in terms of years rather than weeks, that it hasn't started yet. We're just getting into the first inning of what will unfold in this space.
I think that's really important to look at. We were talking about your company a few months ago, and it saw a few big pops, but these big pops come whenever we see these new announcements and new contracts come. And I think as that investment continues, that's really going to be the biggest catalyst, it seems like. Are there other catalysts to look for on when we could see some of those spikes in your stock price and in the whole sector as well?
Yeah, I think orders are the immediate indication, but what drives orders in front of that is geopolitical scenarios, right? And that's probably the biggest driver right now, but also sociological scenarios. So we see things like what unfortunately happened with the assassination in Utah, 100%, or the assassination attempt on President Trump during his campaign. All of that could easily have been mitigated with the use of drones. And not just because there was eyes on the situation, but all of the advanced intel, the data, everything else would have told us so much pre, during, and post that event. And so those types of things really act as catalysts because they save so much time, money, and lives. So those are the more of that stuff that happens, and we're going to see more and more and more of it at exponential levels, the more budget that's going to get driven into this because it solves the problem and it solves it in a way that's less expensive than any other way possible. And then you take a look at, okay, who's producing, the coolest results, who's getting great customer feedback, who's attracting the right people, who's got signature contracts. Those are going to be your Googles and Amazons of 3 or 4 or 5 years from now.
Very good. Always such an interesting conversation, Cameron. Thank you so much for your time today and for sharing a little bit more with investors about what's going on in the drone space. Thank you for watching, everyone. Let us know what drone stocks you are interested in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And let us know, did you get in early on Draganfly before this latest contract was announced? We'd like to hear that in the comments too. As always, everyone, happy investing.